Okay, great. Hey, everyone. This is ACDC number 162. It's issue 1638 in the PM repo. So today on the agenda, we have Fusaka and Glamsterdam, and I think it might be quite packed today. So let's go ahead and get started. So first up with Fusaka, I wanted to check in if there are any updates on DevNet 3. I think the DevNet itself was going pretty well. And then we started doing some testing. And so far, I think the tests have been pretty good. I think we're in the middle of one right now. Perhaps Perry or Barnabas have an update in more detail there.
Yeah, I can go. So in Fusaka Devnet 3, we've mostly seeing close to perfect participation. And I've listed a couple of non-finality tests that we wanted to do, and we've been doing over the last, let's say, 2-ish days. The first one was where we created non-finality and took out about 40-ish% of the network. And these were just full nodes. So the network still had a lot of super nodes, and we put them back together, and the network healed in under an epoch, which is great to see. Right now, we're doing a non-finality test where most of the super nodes are taken offline, and we've submitted exits. And once the exits are through, the network should sort of self-heal. And then we'll bring the super nodes back online and log how long it takes for the network to be okay again. There's two more scenarios that I've listed on there, some with a few malicious actions, and would be great if people can add more to the list of tests we have. This is all to do with DevNet 3. Before we started earlier today, we had 100% participation, which is great to see. Since the DevNet 3 testing's been going full steam, we also started DevNet 4, which will be going live tomorrow. And this is a really, really large network. I think we're planning about 15 to 1600 nodes. The nodes are going online as we speak, and we should be set up for Genesis tomorrow morning. We're going to do roughly 1 day worth of data for each step. And I think the last BPO goes up until 4872 blobs. And the idea is that we can collect 1 day's worth of data with 8 hops and with everything running as we expect it to run on roughly 10% of mainnet size. And this should give us a decent idea on how PureDAS scales. And we should be able to present it in 2 weeks at ACDC again. I think that's all the current status. We've outlined the plan for the DevNet and the spec. Everything's on the interop chat.
Okay, great. Awesome. You mentioned a list of different testing scenarios, like we started with on DevNet 3. Is there a list actually written down somewhere, or where should we collect other ideas? Okay, you're on Discord. I'll just grab this link.
Yeah, I sent the message and we can create a thread and discuss it there.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, DevNet 3 moving along. DevNet 4 will be really interesting to see what happens as we really crank things up on a much bigger network. And yeah, I think from there that takes us into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the BPO schedule. So, as we all know, we have this BPO feature where we can kind of independently change the blob counts once we deployed a given hard fork. And essentially, it's time now to think about what the schedule should be for Fusaka. I could give a little more context, but Justin, you had a document. Maybe you just want to take it over from here.
Yeah, sure. Can I share my screen?
Sure.
1 second. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Cool. So hi, everyone. I'd like for us to start discussing possible blob limit schedules. It'd be good to get a sense of what this looks like and what our priorities are. I've made this proposal, which I believe would work well. There's a single phase with 3 BPO forks. There's approximately 1 month between each BPO fork. And after 3 months, we would target 21 blobs and with a limit of 32 blobs per block. The epoch values I've chosen, which are below, are not, I don't want them to be like exact times. So maybe don't debate this too much, but I propose for the Fusaka upgrade to happen end of October, beginning of November. Yep, and then like I said before, like a month between. So the first BPO fork would be December 15th, before Christmas and after Thanksgiving in the US. BPO 2 would be January 14th, 2026, another month later. And then BPO 3 would be February 10th, approximately. These times that I've chosen are best for like Asia and Australia, because there are so many people working in PeerDAS there. Yes. So I just kind of want to get a broad agreement on what we think this should look like and what our priorities are. Thoughts?
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so I guess one other thing here, just to ground the discussion, is there's sort of this phase one here, but then the idea is that we'd have a second phase, we'd have another BPO update sometime in 2026 that would, assuming it all looks good, to scale us up to this 8x on top of Pectra that PeerDAS should theoretically provide, right? So getting to like target of 48. People seem to prefer having this like phase deployment where we have a much more gradual rollout at the beginning. That seems wise. Fusaka will be new on mainnet. PeerDAS will be new on mainnet. So it seems appropriate to start out with a more gradual rollout. So then we have this schedule that would ship. We'd have another phase early 2026 that would add more BPOs to get us up to 8x throughput, again, assuming everything looks good and there are no surprises as we start to scale. From there, in terms of this chunk of things, yeah, I think the main thing is just the dates. At least for me, these are pretty spaced apart and we could compress them a bit. And the question is why? Well, we want to get to higher throughput sooner. But this is obviously something we have to trade off against with respect to security, right? So we don't want to be too aggressive, but we also don't want to like leave any scaling that's possible on the table because again, there are rollups who are looking for more blobs. There are other players in the ecosystem who would like to be rollups and basically aren't, just because they see there's not enough DA throughput for their use cases. So given all that, anyone else have any other comments about this document and this general shape of the BPOs? I think one other thing here, I think Pandops is planning to do testing to validate these numbers. I guess, yeah, Perry, a quick question there. Is this tied into devnet 4 or are you thinking a different set of experiments?
No, it's tied into devnet 4.
Okay, so yeah, so basically we'd have scaling on devnet 4, again, with like a much higher node count, more realistic network parameters, and that would inform this data, especially the actual target and max numbers that we'd want. Then otherwise the question is more up to us as to like what kind of spacing we want. If this is like much more compressed, then we have less time to observe mainnet. But again, if we just delay it because we can, then it'll just take much longer to get to, say, an 8x amount of scaling. So with all that said, anyone else have any other comments? I think one other comment here is that if we do, say one BPO a month, I think this gets us to something like a potential 8x in April of next year. Does anyone have any input here? They think this looks good. I did have a different suggestion. Let me go find the comment. Yeah, basically moving the dates a bit up. So you can imagine doing BPO 1 on 24th November, BPO 2 on 15th December, and BPO 3 on 14th January. And that just kind of pulls everything forward a bit. Anyone have any comments either way? Yeah, Ansgar?
Not a comment directly on the dates, more maybe a question. So obviously we would have to have validated all the throughput levels up to basically the BPO 3 numbers before the initial fork rollout, right? Because that would then be automatically bundled. Would we want to already in advance kind of have some sort of ballpark understanding of if say, for example, 21 is the number, or like I guess 32 because that's the worst case, of course, 32 blobs is the number we aim for right now, but then pandops comes back and actually we can only prove up to, we only have really reliable numbers up to 24. I assume then we would all agree, okay, we actually do, I don't know, 1824 or 1624 something, and we don't delay the fork. We just basically cap out a little bit lower, and then we use the time until early next year to validate higher throughput and ship more BPOs. But if they come back and maybe they can only validate up to 12 blobs, that might actually be a reason to delay and halt the fork. So do we have some sort of, like, up to what level would we just cap the BPO3 basically and still ship on time, versus where would we say, okay, this is a meaningful enough hit to the kind of throughput targets that we would want to roll out with Fusaka that we would delay and put more time into validation?
Yeah, I mean, what would be the argument for delaying? Like, even if we had to like ship a BPO that's like much lower than we're expecting, we would still get PeerDOS live on mainnet, right?
That was my thought. And then also you get mainnet data with PeerDAS. You get to know things like the distribution of supernodes and things that kind of factor into how far we can scale. So I would say that even if we didn't have those numbers up to higher amounts, that we would still ship, just because we only get more data about how far we can push scaling by shipping Glamsterdam. That was actually one of the biggest motivations originally behind BPO forks to begin with.
Interesting. So we would basically ship no matter what, in a sense. I mean, obviously, like at whatever level we feel that is definitely stable, but that could be basically as low as no throughput increase to begin with at all. It's just about getting it out there, getting data, and there's just no, given that we basically are already confident at this point in time that we don't need any spec changes at all anymore, kind of as a result of things we encounter in late stage testing. I guess, yeah, we can always just address it with BPOs. Okay, that was an update for me, so thank you. That's useful.
Yeah, I don't really see why we'd want to delay the fork. And yeah, it may just mean the BPO schedule looks a little different than we are expecting. So in any case, we could bike shed this the rest of the call today. So we might go ahead and time box this. Let's see any other things to bring up. Yeah, I did want to open the conversation because I think it will ground the next few discussion points. Some of these things that we're going to get to in a second depend on how ambitious we're trying to be. And yeah, wanted to make the point that it seemed like people are generally okay with something like this directionally. I think also the experiments that PanOps are doing will help inform these numbers, give us a little more confidence in them. But ultimately, yeah, wanted to open that thread today. And yeah, I'm sure this is something we'll circle back to on future calls. So unless there are any other comments or questions on that BPO schedule, let's move to some testing updates. So this is following a thread from ACDT on Monday, where there was some discussion around, I think, at least two different things. There's this notion of this like perfect PeerDOS configuration and having Node being able to sync. I think there were also some questions around the custody backfill in the event that your custody assignments change and you need to, like, again, backfill in these different columns you're supposed to have. So I was curious for an update here. I think we had said on Monday we'd follow up with the idea of having a few more days for client teams to work on these features. Are there any things, any updates here or things we should discuss?
Is this the right time to talk about timeline?
Yeah, I mean, it ties into it, I think.
So no, it's hard for us to stand up and to reach out about this, but there has been some internal discussions between a lot of the client teams, and we have concerns with the timeline. And I know I'm the voice that you guys are hearing bring this up, but it is not just me, nor is it just us. So I'm speaking on behalf, and I've been asked to talk for us for Prism and for Nimbus, and they're on the call as well in support. We have concerns that the rush in order to get to where we are for a September 1 cutting of images in order to do the release on that timeline is aggressive. We also have concerns surrounding some of the testing that we think might also be beneficial to give peace of mind and to move to mainnet smoothly. The major concern is that we're not on master, so we'll be done with that basically this weekend. We're going to be done, but I know that Prism and Nimbus are going to need more time in order to get everything fully reviewed and to be comfortable with the code that's actually going to be running on mainnet. This is something that I think we're advocating for a devnet that has all of the code on the trunk branch. It's a lot of code that needs to get merged, as Manu just brought up. There has also been no devnets where there has been a quote unquote spec freeze, and then the ability to go from one devnet to the next devnet. Granted, 4 is basically the same as 3, but our code isn't on master. And so now being able to test, to execute that code or to exercise those code paths on trunk branches, we think is critically important. The timeline that we've been talking about is basically 4 extra weeks. So end of September. And this is something that, and I agree with you, POTUS, that I think being able to test this stuff on Holešky is so that testnet can get shut down, I think is outside of the discussion, because that, whether we're exercising those code paths on trunk branch or not for Holešky, I think is less of a concern. But I think being able to have one solid devnet with no spec changes and all of the code on trunk branch is critically important for the success of this rollout. There's also been no private mempool testing up to this point. And there's a concern that the GetBlobs v2 has been a crutch in order to make sure that syncing and following head works well. And we think that needs to be exercised as well. So this is something that I know, again, that I'm the voice that you're hearing speak on behalf of this issue, but it is something that there is a lot of consensus among the consensus teams. We've been having a really deep heart to heart about this because we know the importance and the critical nature of getting these timelines met. So I want to open the floor, though, in case I've missed anything, to the other people that also feel that that we need a little more discussion. Now, this is the thing that we thought about, Justin, is that realistically, if we could get the rest, yeah, sure. If you want to, if they feel comfortable speaking up, please feel free. I was just on the call with Manu and Dustin.
Yeah, so yes, one of my concern was the fact that we should test the clients without the help of GetBlobs v2. I noticed that we had a lot of failing devnets, pure devnet 3, 4, 5. And I don't remember exactly when pure v2 was introduced, but I do remember that as soon as PureDAS v2 was introduced, the devnet started to be really stable. That's why, yes, I think we should have something really close to mainnet regarding private mempool. I'm talking about private mempool because when you have at least one blob which is in a private mempool, the get blob v2 does not help at all. And we should have something very close to mainnet about this private transaction. When I look at now on Dora Explorer, it seems we don't have a lot of blocks with private blobs. I mean, Paritosh just said to the chat that it's only now, but a few days ago it was the case.
Yeah, the thing is we're doing non-finality testing. So the circuit breaker triggers and then it disables the MEV workflow for most clients other than Lodestar. So you won't see private mempool testing working for all of today, but we were doing it in the week.
Yeah, we've been doing it for like 2 weeks. We've been posting blob data only to the MEV relay. So we have been doing maybe 90% of all blobs in devnet 3 with private mempool. There's some other
I posted an example. I posted an example MEV block from like 5-ish hours ago. So this is before we started the non-finality test. And this was all with private blobs.
There are some bugs in Wrath right now where the transactions don't get passed to the R builder. That bug is actually being worked on right now. So we saw some ups and downs in terms of number of transactions.
And I don't want to, and I apologize, I don't want to, you guys at DevOps do an amazing job. Like Heath PanOps, you guys are fantastic. And I know that we're exercising a lot of these edge cases. And again, yeah, exactly, Ansgar. Like I believe that like that is a piece of things, but really the major concern is really the fact that we have code paths that are not fully merged yet, and a devnet that has stable specifications with that code well reviewed, battle tested, and hardened and ready. Like really, it's ready to rock and roll. And like there has been a lot of effort that's gone into doing a lot of the testing and some of this edge case design, but it's a complicated feature with a lot of code. Like we have a lot of code between all of us. It's 20,000 some lines of code between our 3 clients that needs to move to trunk branches, and that's really, I think, the major concern. I don't want to sideline it with the testnet specifications. Is that a large portion of the code bases are we've exercised this codes on feature branches, but feature branch still needs to be merges. There's merge conflicts that happen. There's a lot of effort that goes into doing that, and I know for a fact that we've all discussed that this is something that needs to be a focus for the next fork so that we don't get in this situation. I think that after speaking with Paul, like he basically instilled upon me the importance of making sure that the feature branch stuff gets merged early and aggressively. And I think that's something that because it's been complicated and we've been doing it as feature branch testing, we're now kind of in the situation where we have this it's just a lot of work in order to get it there, and having that peace of mind that it's going to be a smooth rollout, considering how Pectra, like, and this is where this is what is the concern, is that we did an amazing job testing Pectra on the devnets, and we did an amazing job planning for it. We had 2 smooth releases, 2 smooth devnets that worked spectacularly, and then we got to the testnets, and it was a simple constant that caused it to go haywire. And then because there was so much effort, and it's a human issue, not a specification issue. It's not a testing issue. It's that we were all so focused on making healing the test net that literally the same constant was wrong on the next test net. And it's not that it's a specifications break. It's not that we don't want to get into a situation with the forest for the trees and miss something small that causes a bigger issue because we're all scrambling. And being able to step back in a way and breathe and then have the time to look for icebergs is really the primary concern.
What I would add to that, I think, is in terms of responding a bit to the idea of the Congo line, but also in general, one of the challenges with achieving that was that, especially because we're DevNet 1 and DevNet 2, things were changing quickly enough that it was sort of unclear whether it was worth merging things along the way. So this is in Pectra, there was more time to kind of do these gradual merges to our trunk branch. For Fusaka, things remained so unstable in all respects. I mean, the specs for quite a while. Validator custody was decided at the last metaphorical moment, and etc. And by the time that, like, the very moment, again metaphorically, that the DevNet 3 is becoming kind of stable, for at least so it appears right now, then now, like, is everybody's trunk branch ready? Well, no, we're not going to destabilize our production branch for this. Not so. And Pectra did not have this timing issue where it was immediate turnaround from sort of unstable specs and everything else to is trunk ready.
Now, I know nobody wants to delay this, including us. Like, no, we don't want to be bringing this up, but we feel it's important, and this is exactly why we wanted to at least bring it up. And I think that's probably we talked about some of this timing, that if we could if we do push back the 4 weeks, we'd be able to do everything but mainnet before Devconnect. And that would leave Devconnect, post Devconnect for mainnet. And I don't know if doing it at Devconnect as an interop, we've talked about that, but like, to be fair, Paul brought up a great point, is that no one wants to fly home from Devconnect if, God forbid, something happens on mainnet. But the idea that we could do an interop and actually do the rollout together and hold hands, and, like, I know we can all sing Kumbaya, which everybody loves, but there are options and opportunities for success that I think that, just because it's after Devconnect, at least mainnet, any thoughts about that?
What was the suggestion for Devconnect?
So if we do push releases, like final releases, out 4 weeks, so it's basically end of September, October 1, somewhere in there. That would push mainnet from where it stands today to, it would be just after Devconnect, or possibly at Devconnect. I don't know if it's the right idea for us to all get together and do it while we're at Devconnect. I don't know if that's creates more. I don't know
if everyone's going to be at Devconnect. It's kind of hard for some people. But yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. So I hear all of that. Thank you for bringing it up. I mean, definitely we should talk about this stuff. I guess my first question would be, like, how confident are we in needing 4 more weeks?
this is something we basically all got into a TG in order to assess this as the main people developing, and it's the number that we're and I'm speaking on behalf of us, Nimbus and Prism. And again, guys, please feel free to raise your hands if you have any, or if I say anything that's out of what we've already talked about. But we all feel very confident that with the additional 4 weeks, so the end of September, because like we can possibly get onto, and I'm speaking for the three of us as a team, as a group, we can possibly get onto trunk branches by the September 1 timeframe, but that doesn't leave any time for double checking, for making sure that testings are hardened, for doing a devnet, which really I think is the critical thing, is having a devnet with everything on trunk branch. And that would be the thing we would shoot for after releases are done, in the month of September. And so that 4 weeks really buys the time in order to do that, to do the additional testing on trunk branches.
Is there a chance 4 weeks turns into longer than 4 weeks?
I know for us, as far as Lodestar, no, I think we're probably in great shape at that point. But I would like to, ask Manu and Dustin, because we talked about that, but I'd prefer to have them speak. I don't want to speak on their behalf, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for Prism, I think it's doable to merge everything for September 1st, but it will let very little time really to be absolutely confident about the code we merge. So definitely adding 4 more weeks will helps a lot. And additional thing is if we sorry. If we run the new devnet, so devnet 4 before the code is merged in trunks, that means that we will have some code in our code base which goes through Fusaka and BPO1, BPO2, and BPO-N, which are never on the trunk branch. So I think the last devnet should definitely be run on the trunk branch of every client to be sure that the fork epoch is running on the trunk branch. Yeah. And exception is maybe Holešky actually, but for sure for Sepoli and Hoodie it should be the case.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So there is the suggestion here to do Holešky still in September. What exactly does this buy us? Other than we can just see it live, I guess.
Yeah, and making sure that all the interops work correctly, like that to us, we feel is important.
Right. And so, okay, but then I guess the concern then is that we wouldn't have everything on a trunk release, let's call it.
Just a random question. Is it possible to run a devnet after Holešky? Or
I think sure. Yeah. You can run devnets whenever, yeah.
Yeah, also we're planning on continuing testing until mainnet. We wouldn't be stopping once we have releases.
Oh, okay.
We are talking about a 2 months lead time here, just so everyone is aware of it. We don't plan to do mainnet in October. We're still planning to do mainnet in November. So like we can get Holešky released out on a feature branch if someone is not ready, and if someone is ready, then we're gonna use their trunk branch. Like I don't see this as a absolute blocker. We can have client releases for Sepolia. If we need to, we can push that by 2 weeks, and then have the Hoodie releases also pushed by 2 weeks.
Yeah, I tend to agree that whether it's a trunk branch or a feature branch for Holešky, but POTUS is right. It's non-finality testing for the code that we have. And really that's the big concern, considering that we're going to do non-finality testing, and backfill really isn't a thing yet for anybody, and that's really where it starts to become critical, is when you get into these non-finality situations where you need to make sure that data is propagated pretty widely, so that it's available when you have a very limited subset of peers. And same thing for the perfect peer DAS scenario. That is a challenge. And so is it critical that we're on trunk branch and all this stuff is ready for Holešky when we actually do a real non-finality kind of a situation? Arguable. We could probably do that on a DevNet 3 style branch, but because we will still see the code exercised. But definitely for a separate DevNet after that, if we do Holešky before we do a separate DevNet, I think it's important that we have that last DevNet, say mid-September, where everything is on trunk branch and we're exercising the actual code paths that are going to go live.
Okay. I mean, can we at least then agree to target Holešky in September? Are we okay with that? Because yeah, I think where this is heading is what Angar has here in the chat. I think we just need to discuss this a little bit more in depth, and see what we can do. Like, yeah, maybe this is the case, and that's the case. It's possible we can cut weeks here and there, and maybe we can do better. I would say to move forward. So, okay, sounds like people are okay with Holešky in September. So, we'll take it a step at a time. We'll focus on that. And in the meantime, yeah, it sounds like the blocker is just general confidence in the code. And a big thing there is that things aren't on everyone's trunk branches, in the code trunk. So I would focus on that. Then from there, yeah, I'm sure myself and others will keep talking with everyone and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks for bringing this up. It's good to know. So
yeah, no one wants to deliver the bad news, but we thought it was important.
Well,
important enough.
It's not, I wouldn't really call it bad news. I think it's more just we should be talking and let's figure out, the best we can do.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's openness to hearing it. We do appreciate that. And I know everybody, all the people that I'm speaking on behalf of do as well. So thank you.
Sure. Okay, so if it's helpful, we can circle back to the details here. Because again, this all kind of started from the point on Tuesday or on Monday with perfect peer DAS and this question of backfill. So are there any things we want to discuss now, or are we okay? I think it was mainly just a question of implementation, so there might not be much to touch on right now. Okay. Then next up, there was a PR here for the Beacon API. So let me just get a link. And right. This is about essentially how the Beacon node exposes blobs to consumers. Is Inflag on the call? He was on that raised the point.
Yeah, I can quickly talk about it. So
Okay.
the main open questions there are basically what kind of filtering do consumers want? So there was a previous discussion of using version hashes instead of indices. And the other open question was, do we just want to return the blob, which was the internal discussion with other teams. So Manu and also Francis from Base was in favor of that, and a few others. To just return the blob and not the commitments and version hash and stuff. So it would be good to get more feedback, especially from layer 2s, which will be the consumer of this. Yeah, just take a look at the PR. I think this can be done async unless someone has an opinion.
Yeah, the point was raised about roll call. Let's see.
Yeah,
I'm not sure when the next one is.
would be next week. But we've been having them on pause for now. As in we haven't been having them. Or try to figure out a bit more the relationship of L1 to L2s and that kind of thing.
Okay.
I mean, I can
We
ask
can just
in
reach out
the local
directly
chat.
and see
Yeah.
if we can get any input. But otherwise, yeah, I think I took a look the other day, and essentially, yeah, the main thing here is just taking away a lot of the like additional consensus data that the rollups, for example, wouldn't really need, and return just the blob. That seems fine to me. Yeah, unless anyone has any comments on this right now, we can just take further discussion to the PR there. And then, yeah, we'll reach out async to different parties, see what works for them. Okay, let's see. So I think that was everything we had for Fusaka. We discussed timelines. And yeah, we're essentially halfway, which leaves the back half of the call for Glamsterdam. We have things to discuss, although I did see Ansgar here propose basically waiting. I don't know if people want to get into Glamsterdam right now. I do think focusing on Fusaka is quite prudent. Yeah, Ansgar.
Yeah, I think personally that we basically the reason we opened the Amsterdam discussion was because we said, okay, Fusaka's out of the door now, everything is kind of just running its course. We can focus on Glamsterdam. I think this kind of discussion has changed that, at least for me, and I do think there's a danger if we basically just normalize splitting attention. So I personally think it would be best practice if we were to basically say, look, right now there seems to be kind of really some urgency around Fusaka. It's even up in the air how much delay we might cause that. It could be that like any splitting of attention could add another week or two or whatever for this delay. So I personally would say that we basically try to work towards being kind of back on some sort of track by 2 weeks from now, and then we basically make the decisions there.
Yeah, I'm curious what other people think. Because, so I mean, yeah, maybe just to give a summary, there were a few things, some people had some updates. And then, yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty much in a place to go ahead and make a call on the headliner today. But I think given this, it does seem more prudent even to, delay this segment by another 2 weeks, so the next ACDC. Well, I think that we CFI'd BALs sort of conditional on what the CL would do. Mark.
I mean, the last time we didn't make a decision on the headline, the reasoning given was that we wanted community feedback, and I think we've gotten that. And I mean, not a lot has really changed other than getting community feedback. I think we've had all the information for quite a while now to make the decision, to be honest. So I don't know. I see like people are waiting to do things like rebase specs on top of each other, and like it has its costs. Delaying that has its costs as well.
Yeah.
I mean, me personally, I would be against delaying this decision because I think we almost could have made it last call.
Okay, let's get into it then. So, okay, there's a bit of a bridge PR to discuss here. This is looking at how we structure the slot in the spec and all the different subintervals. So, oh yeah, thanks, Justin. Yeah, this was your PR, so if you want to give any context, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can talk about it. Hi again. So there's a consensus specs PR that I'd like to merge. It deprecates the intervals per slot variable and defines explicit durations for deadlines, like the attestation deadline. This PR is an alternative to 3510, which we discussed about a month ago. But instead of using milliseconds, this PR defines durations as a percentage of the total slot duration and uses configuration variables instead of preset variables, which Heath Pandops requested. There are several groups that want to merge this PR soon, like this week, so that we can start to really work on Glamsterdam specs. EIP 7782, which is like the shorter slot times EIP, and EPBS sort of depend on this. So yeah, I don't know. I would want for us to merge it soon instead of waiting until after Fusaka, like we originally said. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Were there any open questions we should touch on now? There are a number of comments here.
I do want to say one more thing. So this shouldn't actually change the current behavior. It just defines new configuration variables, and client teams can essentially ignore these until we start to implement Amsterdam.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, unless there's a concrete ask on exactly when to merge this in, I think all we're saying is sooner than after Fusaka, or soon with Fusaka. So, yeah, I wanted to call it up because then, yeah, it definitely touches, I think, on 7732, and I might get the number wrong. I think Fossil is 7806, but there are a number of other EIPs in the consensus specs repo that this would use. So I know we're busy with Fusaka, but if you have a moment, please take a look and provide feedback on the PR. Okay. So then next up, right, we mentioned stakeholder feedback. Nixo, I think, wanted to give a summary of different input that she has found from mathematicians. Nixo, there you are.
Hi. So I'm going to put this link in the chat. Sorry for those who hate Notion, but so basically I focused on the top EIPs that were talked about in the stakeholder feedback, and I just wanted to call out some of the feedback so that we're not having them speak into the void here. But basically, the stakeholders that responded were staking protocol DAOs, validators, sidecar software-based rollup standards, block builders, relays, encrypted mempool software, RPC, and node infra providers, protocol research, bridges, L2s, DEXs, L2 analytics, financial tooling apps, end users, independent stakers. So it was a pretty wide breadth and it was pretty high quality feedback. Some concern callouts that I want to highlight is any slight slot pipelining in-flight changes. Apps are concerned about too much happening up to the end of the fork and want to make sure that there's enough heads up for them to undertake the large engineering costs that would require from them. There was a lot of support for 7805 Fossil, but many people expressed concern about the lack of coverage of blobs. There was also notable feedback about the 8 kilobytes max inclusion list size and inclusion list building logic being up to the consensus client implementation. 7882 had a lot of support, but most people felt like it was under-researched in various aspects, and some callouts there were issuance, validator centralization, and consensus overhead. And I guess we won't talk about EL. It wasn't super contentious anyway. Most people supported block access lists. For the consensus layer, again, most people can 14 of these stakeholders expressed support for Fossil 7805 in conjunction with other options. Only 5 cited it as a primary option. The most support that we saw was for ePBS 7732, 9 listed as their first option, 3 as their second option. There were direct impacts cited on the stakeholder communities, such as trustless exchange between builders and proposers, reducing peak bandwidth, and the ability to scale blobs. There was also support for 7782 6-second slots, 5 as their first options. I will say that the only people who supported direct impacts to their community was Snowbridge as a bridge, but most of the other supporters cited sort of ideological or indirect impacts. And again, a lot of people felt like that was under-researched. So that's sort of just the synthesis of it. I encourage people to go read it. A lot of people gave very high quality feedback.
Cool, thank you. I think this is at least the first time I've seen something like this. It looks like it actually is getting community input, which is really nice. Yeah, okay, maybe that's all I'll say for right now on that. Yeah, any other questions or comments for Nixo or about any of these points? Okay. If not, then we had a request for an update on Fossil from Jihoon. Is Jihoon on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Mind if I share screen?
Sure, yeah, please.
All right. Can you guys see this okay?
We can, but just a comment before we get into it, timeline-wise, we have, I think, other things to discuss. So yeah, I guess just try to move through the slides quickly, or at least don't dilly-dally.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I could use like 7, max 8 minutes. So hello, I'm Jihoon. I'm working on Fossil. I'd like to talk about the complexity of Fossil for both CL and EL. It aims to lay out technical aspects of Fossil to provide solid ground for core devs to make a better technical decision. To make sure everyone is on the same page, I'd like to quickly go over the Fossil mechanism, see how it can be implemented, referring to the spec, and then demonstrate how Fossil can be rebased on top of ePBS. So from Beacon committee members, we borrow 16 validators to constitute inclusion list committee. Inclusion list committee members construct ILs and broadcast it over the peer-to-peer network. Testers and builders collect the ILs, and builders update their payload to include IL transactions. When the proposer submits the block, the testers validate if it contains the IL transactions. If it's yes, they vote for it, and the block would become canonical. Now let's take a look into how it can be implemented. So first, validators can figure out if they have inclusion committee assignment by running this function. Validators need to call it at the start of an epoch and is stable within the epoch and the next epoch. So it has one epoch look ahead. When an IL committee member performs its duty, the CL will call get inclusion list engine API, and the EL will collect IL transactions from the public Mempool and then return it to the CL. And then a validator receives the ILs. They check if it's not equivocated and then catch it. So if any IL equivocation is detected, all ILs from that equivocator should be ignored. But we don't have any selection mechanism. We just ignore it for that slot. So technically the equivocator can just normally produce ILs next time. When a builder updates their payload, they can call fork choice updated engine API. The EL can rebuild the payload or just append the IL transactions at the end of the payload one by one, depending on the implementation. When the testers receive a block and run new payload, the EL validates the IL constraints and return the result. So if the block is not IL compliant, the CL will record the block as IL unsatisfied. We want that block to reorg, so the block won't get the proposer boost. And if it's not IL satisfied, then testers will not vote for the block and proposers will not extend it. So this is how vanilla fossil can be implemented. If you have any question, please feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, we can just move on to how fossil can be rebased onto a PBS. In a PBS, when a proposer receives bids from builders, they want to know if their payload will satisfy the inclusion list. In that regard, we add the IL bid list to builders' bids. A proposer can safely ignore bids that don't have a superset IL bid list compared to their subjective IL view. Then they can select the bid however they want. The IL bid list construction and comparison can be implemented like this, for example. But it's quite straightforward, so I think we can just move on. The other major change is how testers enforce inclusion lists. So let's say that we are testers for slot N, and we receive transaction X, Y, and Z as IL transactions. When the execution payload for slot N-1 arrives, we validate if it contains IL transactions. In this example, let's say that it fails to satisfy the IL constraints because it doesn't have transaction Y for whatever reason. We will mark this payload as not IL compliant. When the beacon block for slot N arrives, we will validate if the beacon block is IL compliant. The only case that we reorg that beacon block is when the parent node was full, but the payload was not IL compliant. Whether the payload was timely or not doesn't matter. If the parent block was empty, we're good. If it was full and IL compliant, we're also good. So if the payload is not IL compliant, the beacon block can reorg it while keep making progress. And this can be implemented in two steps. Two steps because of the separation of beacon block and execution payload. When the execution payload arrives, it works the same with vanilla fossil. The CL relies on the EL for the IL validation. If it's not IL compliant, we mark the payload as IL unsatisfied. And then when the beacon block arrives, we check if the parent node was full and the payload was not IL compliant. If yes, the beacon block should reorg the payload. Otherwise, testers will not vote for it so that the beacon block will be reorg. Other cases follow the PBS spec. Same as vanilla fossil, for any beacon block that is not IL compliant, testers and proposers won't accept it as head. And this is it. So if you have any question or comment, please feel free to share it. And I wrote 2 articles about this, one for the EL, the other for the CL. Please take a look into them if you are interested in details. Let me share the links in the chat, and thank you for your listening.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, just a real quick question from an EL dev's perspective. So when we say it would not have fit, are we implying that the missing transaction would have to be executed against the block that it was missing from? I'm just wondering about the dynamism of the actual gas cost and some kind of gray area around the notion of whether or not it would have fit or not.
So I can share the execution spec later, but the idea is for the IL transactions that are not included in a block, we check if they can be appended at the end of a payload. So how it works is we firstly validate if it's intrinsically valid. And if it's yes, we're gonna check if there was enough gas left to include the gas, and if the transaction sender was affordable. I mean, if the transaction sender can afford the transaction. If yes, it means that the transaction, the missing IL transaction could have been appended at the end of a payload, and then we mark the payload as IL not satisfied.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there are some comments in the chat about the agenda, and people had made requests to get some last minute things in around the headliners, so that's kind of what we're doing now. There was one more request to give a short update on 6-second slots. The way I'm viewing this is we take all of these inputs along with the community input that we got from Nixo, and then we can make the decision today. So that's where this is heading. I mean, we haven't decided the headliner yet, so these are all, I feel like people are getting ahead of ourselves by one step. So anyway, I think Maria wanted to share a quick update. Let's do that. Then we will go to the headliner selection.
Right. Thank you. So I just quickly share my screen. This should be fairly quick. So I just wanted to have an update on some of the numbers that I shared last time. So going back to the metrics that I showed last time. So the first update is on the block arrivals minus the relay publishing time. So this is trying to estimate block propagation, excluding timing games. And the update here is that we were actually using data from a different table that had a few issues. And so Sam from BPO, he realized this and told me the right table we should be using. And actually looking at the community notes now, the 95 percentile is actually much closer to what we were seeing on the internal nodes from BPO. So it's around 865 milliseconds. So this is looking much better now. So it seems like we can do the block propagation in under 1 second. The second update is around just the attestation arrival for missed slots. So because they are missed slots, we are not considering the propagation and execution and validation. So we are just looking at this blue part of pure attestation propagation time. Okay, and for this, I also want to share something that Sam from the FinOps team did. So he was looking at the different percentiles of arrivals for missed slots, and he was seeing the different contributions of the different entities that we got from each year. And we were seeing that initially a big part of the late arrivals were due to a few entities. And we actually reached out to Kiln, which was the one that was showing the biggest change, and they noticed a misconfiguration on their validator that they then later fixed, and this was the result. So now Kiln is the light blue. So here it was the dark blue because it was the first one, and now is in the second place, and so it's this light blue. So it got much better on the higher percentiles. And this actually led to an overall decrease of the 95th percentile from 2.5 seconds to 1.85 seconds. So I think this shows that maybe a way to go about this, or it's something that we are also doing at the moment, is targeting these larger entities that are showing here as big contributors on the later arrivals, and trying to understand what could be causing these, and trying to understand if it's something that we can fix. Yeah, so I just want to say that we are continuing to work on the empirical analysis and trying to find more optimizations. There's been also some good progress on the specifications and also early prototyping in clients. So I think we are working towards a good place here. Yeah, so this is the updates. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything or ask questions. Okay, if not, I will just stop sharing. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, there were some comments in the chat around this data looking a lot better than last time, which is really good to see. So yeah, thanks for that. Okay. Let me just double check, but I think that was everything we had. So, okay, now we come to selecting a headliner for Glamsterdam, which everyone seems very keen to do. And yeah, I think all things taken together, I think where we had left it last time is that essentially EPBS was the leading candidate. You know, one thing there was community input, which we did get now. Thank you, Nixo. And it seems like that was also the selection as well, essentially EPBS. So I think, you know, what I'd propose is we go ahead and SFI 7732 for Glamsterdam. I thought we were essentially waiting for this decision to like simultaneously SFI the ALs on the EL, but either way, we can figure that out. But yeah, basically have those two as our CL and EL headliner, and that unlocks the first step of Glamsterdam scoping. So I suppose we can discuss the decision, but it seems like this is the crowd consensus. Mark?
So we know that that there are synergies between fossil and EPBS. So if we and given the community feedback, there does seem to be a surprising amount of support for fossil, or at least it surprised me how highly the community does seem to value fossil. So I think last call the consensus was towards EPBS for the devs. We just don't have very good visibility on how easy it is to also include fossil yet. As far as I'm aware, we're waiting for things like the EPBS spec to be rebased on top of the fossil, or on top of Fusaka, and then for fossil to be rebased on top of EPBS. And obviously a bit of look into the implementation, but I would also CFI fossil. That would be my vote for now. And then
Yeah,
the conclusion of CFI and fossil.
Okay. I just think process-wise, so that was also why I wanted to have the fossil segment earlier. I think process-wise, we wanted to do the headliners first, and then that would kind of put fossil in this bucket of being a non-headliner. The decisions for non-headliners, I think, will come in the future. I don't think we should try to scope everything today. If anything, I think going step by step is going to be best. So, you know, if we move ahead with the headliners today, which sounds like we are, we should work on those. And yeah, over the coming weeks, we can have the conversation about what other EIPs to put in there. They give us more time to validate these questions around, yeah, how does fossil exactly fit on the PBS? Like, is it a good idea? And all of those types of concerns. Okay, Marcus, here first. Was your hand there from earlier? Okay, yeah, sorry, spoke.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the chat, but I think like Fossil is like right now a bit in a weird place, and I think it might be in a weird place already just because of the headliner structure. I sort of like said this already, but like the fact that it's cross layer and it's also like not too huge of a change, but also like not super small, like put it in a weird position. The fact is like Fossil was considered as a headliner and there was super broad community support for it. So I also don't think it's like super normal or like process wise to just like bump it and just like treat it as like a normal EIP without additional consideration. I think yeah, what I wanted to propose is like yes, like process wise maybe like we can't have two headliners, so just like bump it to the status of a vanilla EIP. And also, consider it's a vanilla EIP, so if it actually ends up being the part that slows down the fork, which from the feedback of like devs that have worked on EPBS and Fossil, like shouldn't be the case, but like you obviously never know. I mean, it is a vanilla head height EIP now, so you could just like move on with the fork without like including Fossil if it turns out to be the actual issue. But I just think like just bumping it as a like, oh yeah, it's actually not a headliner anymore after like the community has signaled like a very broad support for it is very fair either. So yeah, just pointing out it's in a weird position.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to necessarily be weird. So I think we'll have another round of non-headliner EIPs in the future. And, I think Fossil again has a lot of support and it could easily go in there. What I would suggest then is taking the time between now and when we make that decision on non-headliner EIPs to de-risk all these questions around interactions with VBS and any other complexities that could come up there. POTUS and then Barnabas.
So if EPBS is SFI'd and every single client voiced to have Fossil in it, and most of the community asked to have Fossil with it, and there is already work on it, there's already work in rebasing it on top of EPBS, these people are going to continue working on it anyways. It doesn't matter if it's CFI'd or not. I don't see any reason not to CFI it, because CFIing does not mean that we're going to include it, nor doesn't mean that we're going to delay the fork until it's ready. I don't see any negative connotation into CFIing it today because I don't see anyone against it.
Agreed.
Okay, Barnabas. I think this is going to be your counter comment, Otis.
No, I agree with POTUS.
Okay.
I'm actually quite surprised that Fossil got demoted as a non-headliner. It was proposed as a headliner. It's a massive change on its own. I don't see a reason of not having both of them in, but we shouldn't call it Fossil as a non-headliner. The whole point is that maybe Glamsterdam will have to have 2 CL headliners and 1 EL headliner.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get too hung up on the exact semantics of headliner.
I think it was just about how much like a headliner is somewhat by definition a very large change, and maybe due to synergies, you might consider Fossil not as large as it would otherwise be. I think that's really the difference in terminology here. It's not anything more than that as far as I can tell.
Right, like whatever goes in will go in, and we just still need to decide what is the right scope. Yeah, Ansgar, and then I have a follow-up comment myself.
Well, so in my mind, there's a pretty big question, at least a potential for a difference in what a headliner means versus a non-headliner, and that is the whole delaying the fork for. I also talked a little bit about it in chat. I do think so. One thing, for example, historically, we've been very, very bad at like trying to sequence work on different features. Like we've been in the past saying, oh yeah, PRDAS is not in a fork, but we still need to prioritize the work on it, and then it just left sitting there until we actually prioritized it in a fork and these things. So like I think if we just say, oh, we will first finish all the work on ePBS and then do the work on fossil, so that basically fossil is the stretch goal that we could just drop, that will not happen. I think what will happen in practice is that work on both of them will be integrated and will basically there won't be a fossil, like ePBS is ready but fossil is not. So like basically it will just like delay both of them by the same amount in a sense. So that's why, to me, initially the headliner status was at least kind of implied some sort of, yeah, this is the feature the fork would wait for, and otherwise you would not wait for the fork. In a sense, basically, like I'm open to, if really the CL devs are confident that these two are easily integratable. I just like given that we kicked out EOF, we have not had any meaningful features on the EL side for basically since Pectra. I really, really, really would not want us to delay Glamsterdam at all from the EL side, because the EL side is very exciting. It's bringing a lot of scaling features across block level access lists and repricings. I think then the understanding must be that whether we call fossil a co-headliner of the CL or a non-headliner does not really matter for me, but the understanding must be that then CL headliners cannot halt the fork under any circumstances. Like if the CL headliners are not ready and the EL headliners are, of course it's by a few weeks, we wait, but if it's actually like still like 2-3 months of work left, we would just go ahead and ship Glamsterdam with only the EL headliners. If that's the understanding, then I personally am perfectly fine with combining these EAPs. Then it's really up for the CLs to basically like pick their own scope here.
Terrence.
Yeah, so I'm probably the only person in this world that implemented both ePBS and fossil, so I kind of know how it works. So I personally don't think like it's that bad of an idea to do ePBS and fossil together in the beginning and then push it. And then if fossil end up delaying ePBS significantly, we scrap out fossil. I think most of the interaction between ePBS and fossil is in the fortress side, because in the ePBS you get this notion of building on full or empty, and then fossil you kind of have this like decision you have to make on whether to reorg the block or not. That's probably the biggest interplay. Other than that, it's pretty like orthogonal. They're very different because of ePBS doesn't have EL changes, and fossil has EL changes, and then the engine API also don't intercept as well. So that part is very nice. So yeah, so I think ePBS by itself, like I speak on maybe just on Prism, on my personal opinion, we can ship like early next year. By early, I mean like maybe like March or April. But then like with fossil, you probably add like a month or two delay. I think that's probably the best way I can quantify it. I guess the question at the end of the day you have to ask is like, are we scoping based on timeline, or are we like basically what are we scoping based on? That's just my 2 cents.
Mark.
I guess, and then a further question, like if we CFI something, like, okay, so we've specified ePBS, which means that the Glamsterdam spec is going to have ePBS in it. Does CFIing something mean that the spec is going to be modified to include those things, or just that the PR is going to be ready for the spec to include those things? Because if it just means that, if it doesn't mean that it's like in the spec yet, then again, I would reiterate POTUS's point that there's no reason to not CFI.
I believe it would be the latter. It would just be a PR that's ready to merge into Glamsterdam.
Okay, so at that point, we're not actually making the decision today to CFI. It doesn't introduce any delay.
That's correct.
I think we do it in a way that, minimizes the risk. So I'll echo Tim's comments here. Essentially, we'd SFI ePBS, VALs today, then sure, we can CFI fossil. Seems to be how people want to play this. I think that is reasonable. But the idea would be that we move ahead with spec and devnets for just the SFI things, and then only once those are stable, then do we think about elevating from CFI to SFI.
I want to make one little note. So if we SFI ePBS, we would essentially rename 7732 feature spec to gloss, however you say it. And then we would rebase 7805 off of that. So just the feature spec for fossil would be rebased. Pretty much.
That
That's how
makes
it would work.
sense to me. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like there are synergies between the two EO features. So then maybe it reduces the complexity of the fossil feature. But yeah, that'd be the hope. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think Hansgrohe will get as strong a commitment as possible. But yeah, maybe then to make it explicit, like, do we feel okay with this plan? Which again, this is following patterns we've laid out in the past, but essentially we would commit to focusing on the SFID IPs before the CFID IPs. Nobody wants to commit. There's some chatter over here in the chat. But in any case, we are coming up on time, and I think we have enough to move forward. So we'll SFI 7732, we will CFI fossil, and that will be it for Glamsterdam today. Ansgar?
Yeah, I want to make one last push against SFIing EPBS. I just saw in chat that the EPBS champion said that there's no chance that EPBS could be ready by March. I understand that we're not specifically talking about timelines for Glamsterdam in general, but like that makes me feel like the earlier statements that EPBS is basically already well implemented, tested, and very, very light, that were somewhat misleading. And given that I think there's a good chance that the EL side will be ready on that timeline, like block level access list and summary pricings, I would personally think that then we might want to revisit only having a single headliner in the fork, which was originally planned, and only having block level access list as a headliner.
I mean, when you said earlier that if the distance between the forks is several months between the EL and the CL side, if the distance is several months, then we, cut the EL sooner. I think that's largely correct. Like the main difference, the main reason not to split the forks up is doubling the testing overhead. But there's obviously a trade-off there between basically how many months there are between. So I mean, as of right now, yeah, we don't know how long it's going to take the EL to implement block level access lists and when they're going to be ready. But I would think generally if there was a large gap between the two sides that we could in principle at a later time decouple them.
Okay, yeah, then sorry. I know that this was not realistic to actually, be revisited. So then I'm happy to have that be the compromise kind of point of view, that we at least very open to the option of these ending up not being delivered together. Of course, but for now, track towards a unified Glamsterdam. That works for me.
Yeah, and to circle back, I think we should be focusing primarily on Fusaka right now. Again, it sounds like it'll be very tight to get that wrapped up this year. So we should be focusing on that. And yeah, I think this lets us make some progress on Glamsterdam, which is good. I also think it's quite early to have a super clear sense of, okay, these exact timelines and what that will look like. So again, SFI 7732, CFI fossil, that settles the Glamsterdam discussion today, and that gives us more to move on with. Otherwise, yeah, we will be talking about / working on Fusaka. Any closing comments? Otherwise, I'll see many of you on the call Monday. Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
You guys.